Hello, my name is Xiaoyu Wang, and I'm a curator and writer based in San Francisco. My practice has a lot to do with this idea of fiction and how fiction is unfolded in our cultural productions today, and also how curator can work closely with artists to sort of looking the ruptures between the fiction and the reality. And I'm very interested in working long term and have a close relationship with the collaboration of artists and also the practitioners outside of the so-called artistic field. For me, I think thinking about this whole big project of Anthropocene is very interesting in terms of how it serves as a lens to look some of the contemporary practice of the artist. But however, I'm not that interested in sort of prescribe this thinking and this idea towards any specific practice. I think this will be the focus for my practice in the next few years. So, thanks.
My name is Alice Carey. I am a curator based in London. Originally, I'm from a region in England associated with farming and farming history, and my family still farms there in Norfolk in East Anglia. This is a big influence on my thinking around the natural world and our conception of it. And I'm presenting my ideas on art and farming for SYNAPSE 2013 because I think that the farm represents an interesting and useful entry point into considering our relationship to a particular environmental situation and our agency within the world around us. The farm culturally is interesting to me as perhaps the original metaphor for productive toil and authentic labour, and I'm also interested in the pull it still exerts on the particular English imagination and notions around identity and authentic action within a natural setting. And I'm particularly interested in the gap I perceive between the construction of the farm through cultural production and the processes that occur within all range of farms and farming activity, as I see this as a zone which has particular pertinence for many of the themes within the Anthropocene.
Hi, I'm Nabil Ahmed. I'm working as a curator, as an artist and a researcher at the intersection of art, architecture, law and human rights. I'm quite interested in what the role of the curator might be in kind of producing or facilitating a kind of an ecology of practices between various disciplines, artists, theorists, philosophers, scientists, etc. But at the same time, I think that this form of discursive, if we might want to call it that, discursive knowledge production, in my work and the people that I perhaps align myself with, will not limit itself to northern epistemologies, but rather that there's a way that these forms of knowledge production could be then translated or produced under different conditions that takes into account kind of planetary conditions such as climate change that we're sort of grappling with, and it finds ways of speaking to other kinds of knowledges that are out there, i.e. at the same time being produced in the South, and this way there could be possibly a true ecology of practices.
Hello, my name is Alek Konantran. I'm based in Saigon. I'm the writer and curator. besides working independently on some project, I also work for one alternative art space named SYNAPSE. I have several ideas about the curatorial practice, particularly in the Vietnamese context. Firstly, it's very much about artistic producer. What do I mean about the producer? The producer is the one who can assist the artist, because I think in the art world, the most important character is the artist. So for the curator, as the producer, she or he would help the artist how to express their ideas at best, not only theoretical or conceptual, but also very many detailed practical things, like how to install the artworks, how to express the artwork in some certain format or the ways that can give the most impressive impacts on the public. The second thing about the curatorial work, I think also very important, is the curator is like the knowledge catalyst. The knowledge catalyst is the one who can use the capacity that merging artistic practice with many other knowledge resources. For example, like natural sciences, like medicine or biology, or science, technical engineering, but also social sciences like sociology, linguistics, or also anthropology. Anthropology is, for me, in the academic world, is very much like also, it has the certain artistic characterizing. So I think when art and anthropology can merge together, can give a very much impact. And the final idea about curator, I think, is about writing. Because nowadays the artists, they can write very well. They can write the artist book like the most conceptual theoretical book. So what about the writing of the curator? I think the curator can write about the artwork in a different approach, like to analyze that in a different way rather than the artist. So the public can, when they come to the exhibition, they can have the idea very much conceptual from the artist, but also like to step behind as the position of the producer, like from the backstage, like the background of how the artist think about their work, but also by the background of the artist. So I think that's the good way of the curator write about the art. So the work of the curator, for me, as my practice, is very much like producer, catalyst, and writer.
I'm Natasha Ginwala. I'm from India and I currently live in Berlin. I would like to make this statement by actually beginning with an image. In 2010, there were floods in Pakistan and a number of spiders actually climbed up in many trees and stayed up there for several months because the flood waters did not recede. So what the tree became was something between spider web and partial tree. And I was interested in this because it's an unsuspecting host, and what we have are a new kind of being and entities, which are spider trees. So to say this and wrap this up in a kind of curatorial statement, I guess I would say that I'm interested in incommensurability, in the limits of comprehension, and when those limits collapse into what is incomprehension, to situate myself there with certain questions. And my current work has dealt with historical modernity as a field of rhythm, which manifested in the Museum of Rhythm, which was shown at the Taipei Biennial. And I'm also on the artistic team of the Berlin Biennale, which is releasing a whole new world of research and possibility.
I'm Etienne Turpin. I'm trained as a philosopher and I work in the higher education industry. I teach architecture and I work in the Center for Southeast Asian Studies at the University of Michigan. My practice is called anexact. Anexact relations are relations that are intentionally left open. They're not imprecise, they're not inexact, but they're intentionally meant to be open and dynamic. A few aspects of my practice that I'd like to talk about. One, working in the archive, or a reassembling of the archive, as a very important way of apprenticing in the Anthropocene. How do we begin to generate a new understanding of the present through doing historical archival assembly, both with artists and designers? Another aspect is quite important for me is developing conceptual work and conceptual frameworks, specifically in relation to the Anthropocene and its connection to philosophical concerns. In addition to that, I have a design research practice called Architecture and Adaptation, which is an attempt to formulate new ways of doing political work related to actual political struggle, particularly in this project in Southeast Asia. And the fourth aspect I would want to emphasize around the Anthropocene is creating a textual context, which is I work as an editor for the journal Scapegoat, which is an architecture, landscape, and political economy journal, which attempts to create a new textual context for debates around political economy in the Anthropocene in relationship to design. So as a curator working in design, somewhere between art and science, I would say that my goals are to formulate practices that allow for mutual aid, cooperation, solidarity, and non-hierarchical structures that can create worlds that are passionate and pleasurable, but allow for forms of conviction and a world that's worth fighting for. Yeah.
This is a workshop about the concept of Anthropocene, right? So I'm going to link my statement to this concept. If we understand the concept of Anthropocene as coextensive with modernity, then the revelation of the Anthropocene today via the ecological crisis is also the revelation of the collapse of the epistemological separation modernity handed down to us, and the collapse also of the modern space of critique that was dialectically binding subjects and objects. And today, I guess this collapse that doesn't keep the subject immune from our objective reality anymore is the ground for our contemporary reality under advanced capitalism. It's something we could call an epidemic of things, a sort of contamination of our present by things, where it seems that our thoughts is not able to follow the accumulative avalanche of events, or seems to be blocked by the comprehension of objective complexity that is overflowing with factors, networks, and events, and where everything seems to be equally something. This is what we could call an epistemological panic, in which distinguishing this from that, or excluding this from that, comes down to equally making this or that into something, no more and no less than something else. And there seems to be no such thing as a negative operation possible anymore, no such thing as the possibility for an epistemological separation. And I think that this panic, epistemological panic, transforms any attempt to represent or to be in a reflexive configuration towards the ground we try to express into a kind of cash register where the declaration of exception of something amounts to ultimately its inscription into the Czech. And I guess that this situation, epistemological situation, sheds light on the fact that a criticality that is often asserted as the requisite of contemporary art might just be maybe another contribution to our objective complexity or the added value of its procedures. So counter to this, what I'd like to propose, that is kind of my statement here, is to think art under the condition of this epistemological panic, and think ways with art to slice through and cut off this constant accumulation of things in order to perceive their polyvocal qualities.
My name's Laura Cassidy Rogers. I'm working out of Palo Alto, California. If I were to describe my curatorial approach in one word, it would be experimentation. And if I were to then expand on what I mean by experimentation, I could develop a word cloud to include adaptation, art and science, earth systems, whole systems, materiality, uncertainty, as well as slowness, which is important to me in my practice. If I were to elaborate further, I would start to engage with media technologies and the layers of those technologies as they interact with each other as well as living ecosystems, trying to move beyond representations of environment and flexible structures of participation in those environments to traverse that gap and have a kind of slow systems perspective on technology, people, and the environment. I'm interested in both old media as well as new media, so digital maps, video, animation, as well as painting and drawing, and the written word. Furthermore, I'm interested in how these technologies either sustain or degrade these ecosystems. So by looking over a long period of time in this kind of slow systems perspective, we can start to gain an understanding of how these technologies are developing our knowledge systems over a longer period of time. So to conclude, I'd like to speak to exhibition as an iterative site of experimentation that again is not contained within a 3-month or even a year period, but something perhaps as radical and long-term as 50 years. So that's to conclude.